This is Cgtn, China Global Television Network.
I'm Emma Keeling in central London, where a company is harvesting insects which they say could revolutionise farming and help the planet.
And I'm Shini Somara in Salisbury in a jet suit.
By 2050, the global population is expected to reach almost 10 billion. Demand for food could rise by 60%, further impacting already depleted land and oceans. Just like us, the animals we eat need protein. Around 40% of global crop calories go towards animal feed, with the two main sources coming from fish meal and soy. How can we sustainably meet the world's needs on finite resources while protecting the environment? Flies, bugs and creepy crawlies, we kill them without a second thought. But what if insects are the answer to greater sustainability, deforestation and food shortages? Maybe you should put that fly swat down and come with me. Oh, and I should warn you, you're about to see wriggling, writhing larvae. It's pretty gross.
Entocycle's mission is a simple one: to sustainably feed the world using the power of insects. Black soldier flies are one of nature's key recyclers. There is no such thing as waste in nature, and with a black soldier fly facility, we take in food waste, convert that into large insects that we turn into protein meal that we can then feed animals and humans sustainably.
Hello!
Hello, hello, how you doing?
Hi, I bought my PPE, I'm COVID safe. Is it Karen?
Yes, it is.
Good to meet you, Karen.
Fantastic.
Tucked away under the railway arches in London is the R&D office of Entocycle. Director Karen Whittaker founded the company 6 years ago. With a background in environmental engineering, he travelled the world as a scuba diver and saw the pressure food production for the human race can have on the environment.
There are two main problems with the current food supply chain. One is that countries like the UK are massively dependent upon imports, so about 80 or 90%, and that's of two key protein products, soya meal and fish meal, which we import internationally from the likes of Brazil and South America, such as Chile and Argentina. That means we're placing huge issues on other countries to produce the food for us. COVID has perfectly demonstrated the problem with the supply chain, with food being caught at ports. The timeline between products being delivered has just massively increased. So what we need is hyper-local, sustainable protein production, and black soldier flies are one of the key solutions to this problem.
Matt Holl is the company entomologist or insect expert. Oh, cool little office space.
Yeah. And this is the insectary. This is where we keep all of our insects. This is where the magic happens.
I bet. This is your office, Matt. Whoa! What? Is that the insects? That is nasty.
Yeah, so they're eating the food that we're feeding them. So beer grains and coffee are kind of what you're smelling right now. That's what they're eating
That does
today.
not smell like beer grains and coffee. It's quite acidic and it smells a little bit like poo. Despite the smell, Matt was drawn to Entocycle's vision, which aligns with how he wants to lead his life.
In previous entomology type jobs that I've had, they involved spraying lots of harmful chemicals to try to kill lots of insects in remote parts of the world. And I wanted to sort of keep my work a bit more local and try to solve the food waste problem that we're seeing in the country that I live in.
So the black soldier fly larvae, they're the ones that have to do all the yucky work. They have to eat all the waste. Now, warning, we're about to show them to you, and they're very wriggly and a little bit gross. I told you so, but you need to get used to them because they could play a big part in our food future. But anyway, back to the flies. Around 2,000 black soldier flies get on with the business of breeding, which is their sole reason for living. Soon after, they die.
We let the flies mate and lay eggs for about 6 days. You can see the wooden egg traps we have on top of that rotting stuff. That just makes it easy for us to collect the eggs when they do lay them.
And did you think about using other insects? I mean, mealworms are used quite a lot to feed animals, aren't they?
Mealworms need dry, high-quality food stock, whereas we can feed these black soldier flies. I mean, they can process any waste from what we feed, which is human food waste. They can eat meat. They can also eat manure and develop that way. So we can feed them almost anything and get a high-quality protein source out at the other end.
There's no need to tend pastures or grow crops. Food waste is picked up from the local cafes and breweries. Steph Rogers then puts it through a mixer, and the final product will be mixed in with the larvae. But like any dad, Matt must wait for the eggs to hatch in the nursery, or cupboard in this case.
So 24 to 48 hours after we've taken the eggs, they'll hatch out into the food here. So we place them on these hatching platforms.
Yeah.
If you look closely at this one here, maybe at the end of the mesh, you can see really, really tiny, what we call neonatal larvae, the larvae that have just emerged from the eggs.
The black soldier fly, or Hermetia illucens, has a rapid life cycle. Once the eggs have hatched, the larvae live for 3 to 4 weeks before they begin to pupate, and 2 weeks later they emerge as flies. But for protein production, the larvae are harvested and processed after 2 weeks.
Oh, this is it. This is where they just grow.
Yeah.
In these racks.
That's right.
It's a very sustainable, fast food development with a tiny carbon footprint that can be set up anywhere, which is why the food industry is sniffing about.
Right at the beginning, it was quite difficult because the idea of breeding billions of flies, you know, on the face of it, looks quite, you know, crazy. But actually, it's now become mainstream. You know, media are talking about it, supermarkets are engaged with this, feed companies need it. I think COVID and the kind of greater concept of food security has definitely brought this to attention. So we've seen a massive increase in kind of outreach to people who want a more sustainable future for their supply chains. And, you know, it's not going to happen overnight, but the key part here is that we need the technology that enables these facilities to be built. So Entocycle is focused on that key enabling technology so that we can build hundreds, if not thousands, of facilities all around the world.
Next year, Entocycle will build what they hope is the first of many industrial insect protein factories in the UK. Each will contain 5 to 10 million flies on any given day.
Look at that.
So from hatching to harvest, the larvae will actually grow about 10,000 times their mass.
Those going on to become flies go into the pupa stage, which is like a cocoon.
In the opposite way that the larvae are photophobic, they try to burrow away from the light, the flies are actually phototactic. They're attracted to the light. The flies actually don't have the ability to eat or gain any energy. All of the energy that the flies have was stored from the larval stage. So we don't want the flies to waste their energy by buzzing around these lights. So we keep them in a dark chamber here.
Yeah.
And let them emerge as flies in these
Listen to that
containers.
sound. I mean, that would be really annoying if I was at home, but here it's quite fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Entocycle is planning trials with salmon and is hoping the EU will soon approve trials for chickens. But to satisfy demand in future, they'll need to be delivering 50 to 100 tonnes of insect protein a day. That means perfecting the processes here in the insectary. Each day, Steph harvests eggs from the traps.
This is all about standardisation, so making the process the same every single time, every single day, the same process.
And so how many eggs does each black soldier fly lay?
So a female can lay between 600 and 1,200, around 600, 800 is normal. But what we care is about the efficiency of getting the majority of the females to mate and lay eggs. So with the same amount of eggs hatching, to have the larvae to eat the same amount of food, to produce the same amount of larvae that will produce the same amount of flies, that will then again produce the same amount of eggs. And so it's all about making that process as continuous and as streamlined as possible so that downstream it becomes really easy to produce protein and more flies.
So you're talking about scalability there?
Exactly. So standardisation is fundamental. It's easy to farm insects badly. It's difficult to farm them well and at scale. And so that's what we do here at Entocycle.
Right. And so this is easily scalable?
Yeah, this is fantastically easy scalable.
While humans are terrible polluters, nature cleans up its mess. What's being separated here are pupae and the digested waste, also known as frass or poo.
Oh, that's one hell of a massage. So are the pupae all right after
Yeah,
that?
they're absolutely fine after this process. As you can see here, they're still fine and moving.
Tell me a bit more about the poo.
So the insect frass, is as what it's known, is essentially the leftover digestate. And we've been running trials with universities that have shown that with about a 5 to 10% inclusion of our frass, we can have almost 100% larger plants.
So I can take some of this for my tomatoes?
Yes, you can. Although this is highly, highly sought after. So we're sending this off to multiple partners as well as academics. So this is what it's all about. This is the final product. This is whole, dry, black soldier fly larvae.
Wow, they're not very big, are they? So do you feed them whole like this?
No,
to the animals?
so the reality is we dry them and extract a high quality protein flour. So this meal is what we're going into the animal feed pellets to make the high quality protein that they then need to grow.
Oh. And so, I mean, can I eat this? Is it safe to eat?
Yeah, of course, go for it.
I'm going to give it a try. Oh, it's a little bit crunchy. Oh, it's kind of nutty.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, this is not for humans. I mean, it could be down the line.
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, the here and now is to sustainably feed animals, but very much so you can see this baked into pastas or breads or other kind of high carbohydrate products where you can get your protein, you know, without harming the planet.
Kieran is targeting the insects to provide 5 to 20% of fish or animal feed. He says it not only contains the key 12 amino acids that are needed for animals and humans to grow, but it's also hypoallergenic.
Reality is the money investment is going there, the government support is going there, and the interest, just proof in having this conversation with you guys proves that this is going to be one of the key new industries. We won't necessarily need Facebook in 100 years. We will still need to eat, and we'll need to eat sustainably. So this is one of the few companies where I think, you know, you can build a legacy of sustainability and businesses that just do good by default.
The world has changed under the pressure of the pandemic. For many of us, life is returning to some kind of normal. As we're adapting to changes in all of our lives, let Global Business Europe be your guide to the new normal. Join us weekdays on Cgtn.
To actually be able to hover in the air like that, I'm going to have to do it to believe it. Oh, yeah. The idea of being able to fly by ourselves seems something of a fantasy. But today, I'm going to meet a man that has managed to do that, fly by himself. He straps 1,000 horsepower to his back and reaches speeds of 85 miles per hour. Richard,
Pleased to meet you. Yes, come in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a museum to the various prototypes we've gone through in the last 3-4 years. So.
Incredible.
It ended up being a little bit of an evolutionary journey, and actually started, dug this out, this horrible lump here. This was the very first prototype arm assembly.
That seems really heavy.
Yes, and it's got lots of sharp corners, and it was built in a hurry just to, yes, you can feel how heavy it is.
Oh my goodness.
Its weight reflects the uncertainty I had right at the beginning of just how sensible it was to have a jet engine attached to your arm. So I thought, well, let's just build it out of something really solid, so in case there's some kind of problem I haven't thought of, it's not going to hurt me. The conventional wisdom was that with a spindle spinning at 120,000 RPM, you would actually find that you couldn't move it. So like a spinning bicycle wheel, if you tried to move it, it would fight you in a perpendicular fashion. Turns out, not at all. It was easy, really benign. It was just a gentle but increasable shove of the air coming out the other end.
So that sounds like lesson number 1.
Massively. And then rapidly went to the point, and they're stuck up on the wall up here. They are now heavily modified. I had a theory that if you put one either side of your fist, that the net result of the thrust would feel like it was going up your arm. So it now is just like you're leaning forward on a table. It's like very, very effortless. There's something we should point out as well. I've talked about the arm engines, but actually a large part of the support comes from the rear engine, which originally was an engine on the back of each leg. You know, we've got the original boots up in the corner there, which I used to use to house the engines, but they gradually moved up the legs until they were kind of on my posterior, and then eventually got consolidated into one larger engine here. And that provides a third of the lift to lift, a third of your body weight and the weight of the fuel and itself. So between those 3 points of the kind of camera tripod, that gives you the support to be able to actually manipulate and control and maneuver.
Have you gone through a lot of mistakes and failures?
You can see from some of the examples, we've had a few spills over the last 4 years.
My gosh, that's really mashed up.
Yeah, I mean, but it's quite deliberately soft aluminium, so it looks more dramatic than it is. But yeah, you have to take some degree of risk when you're breaking new ground and doing something new. That learning journey was all about actually trying things that had never been done before, but all the time managing the downside, because actually, to be honest, it involved falling over, mostly on a farmyard where we were testing it. All the time, only from a couple of feet there. We always absolutely manage that downside risk. Otherwise, if you can't get back up again because you've broken your legs because you've gone too high, you can't keep innovating and trialing.
And this is your lab?
Yep, this is where we build, test, break things, rebuild things. Yep, absolutely.
I guess one of the key features that you're concerned about is how much it weighs.
Yeah, so anything that flies there has to be a consideration of the weight that you're trying to lift. Especially in our case, we don't have wings with this version. We are only flying by literally throwing enough mass of air downwards fast enough to lift you off the ground. Actually, an important point, a lot of people think this is pushing on the ground. The Newtonian physics doesn't work like that. This is simply blowing air downwards and you rising up. It doesn't make any difference whether you're 2 foot off the ground or 20 feet or 100 feet.
So it's a bit like pointing a hairdryer at the floor.
Yeah, even a domestic garden hose, when you turn it on, you can feel it shove you very slightly. It's that same force. There's mass being thrown that way, so naturally it wants to impart the same force the other way.
To understand this, we need to remember 2 things. 1, gravity is the weakest force in the universe. The reason we stay attached to the Earth is simply because it's so big. 2, Isaac Newton's third law of motion states that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So the action or the force exerted by the engines on Richard's body is enough to overcome the action or force of gravity, holding his body to the ground. Enough theory, time for some action. Just been given these because apparently it's going to get really loud, and now Richard is going to get his jet suit on. It's really exciting. How are you feeling at this stage? Have you done it so many times that it's kind of like second nature?
I have no concerns about my ability to fly. I always have a healthy respect for the fallibility of the technology, so that's why you don't go too high. So it's always a respect for that.
Feeling?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, no, really good. I mean, it's a very simple little flight, yeah, you see the control and stability.
Yeah, I mean, you were just so stable, but you honestly looked like you were just floating on air.
That's what it feels like. You just feel like you can go anywhere you like in three-dimensional space.
The idea that jet engines are allowing you to hover in the air. I get the mechanics, I get the theory. It all stacks up from an engineering point of view, but to actually be able to hover in the air like that, I'm going to have to do it to believe it.
This way.
Yeah, one side and one the other. Yeah, you can slacken it a bit if you need to. Yeah. Cool. Does that feel pretty good?
Yeah.
And then if you walk down here, I'm just going to hold your arm a bit. This is probably the most dangerous part of the whole thing. It's walking down the ramp. Okay.
Oh, it's heavy.
Yeah, you get lighter when it starts up. So, what we're going to do, you're going to press that kill switch in. The lights will be flashing. Okay? I'm going to watch all the lights. When I say, okay, good to go, I want you to lift these up and move them down into this position.
I could feel the downward forces ramping up on my arms, and the smell of jet fuel was overwhelming. At this point, I'm glad I'm attached to a harness. So clearly I need a bit more practice, but for my first attempt, it really hit home how hard it is to gain control over the engines, and they were at their lowest setting. Actual liftoff was probably going to take a few more attempts and a lot more courage.
He did it for you. Get the weight up here, yeah? How was that?
That was
crazy, huh?
awesome. I'm shaking like a leaf. I don't know if that's exhilaration or just terror. There's all these thoughts going through your mind, like, am I absolutely nuts to be doing this?
That's very common, yeah.
Plus, you know, when I think about the fuel and I think about the power that I've got attached to me, and it's kind of humbling because you realise that you're not.
They don't look like they do much, do they? They're little metal tins, and yet the amount of kind of power and noise.
The force, and like the knowledge that a slight movement could send you spinning. What kind of technology has come out of all of this work that will affect the way we fly?
In terms of practicality now, this would not be my chosen way to take the kids to school or pop down to the shop for a pint of milk. But then again, the first motor cars were considered noisy, smelly, inefficient and terrible compared to the best technology at the time, which was a horse, perfectly good horse. And look where cars have got to. We've made amazing progress in the last 150 years of getting in flight vehicles and flying around inside them. Well, this is just opening people's minds to, if we go back to basics, what do we have to add to our human form in order to actually fly a bit like we always imagined?
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
On the agenda with me, Stephen Cole, we look up into space. We look down into data. We look at debt. We look at politics. We look at opioids, climate change. We look at all the issues that really matter around the world. But you matter too. We want to tell the stories you want to see and hear about. Make it your agenda.
Putting a brush through your hair is a morning ritual for most, and in times of stress it's not uncommon to find more hair in the bristles. So it's no surprise we're starting to hear reports of COVID-19 sufferers losing clumps of hair, but there may be other reasons.
I do have generally quite thick hair, but I would say my hair has kind of, my ponytail has pretty much like halved in size since the hair fall that I've experienced. My initial thought was more, oh God, what's happening? I swear I'm losing more hair than normal.
Roisin O'Connell's hair started falling out around 3 months after suffering 2 weeks of COVID-19 symptoms. She later tested positive.
I basically noticed it when I started brushing my hair. I noticed more hair in my hairbrush, and then when I was showering I noticed it at the bottom of the shower, and it seemed like it was falling at quite an alarming rate. So obviously it was quite a scary experience.
And are we talking sort of really large clumps that were falling out?
Yeah, it sort of ranged day by day, but some days were worse than others, but generally quite large clumps of hair at a time were coming out.
Roisin is an administrator at the Belgravia Centre, a leading hair loss clinic in London. She was reassured by trichologist Raleigh Bossanova, who said she wasn't alone. So when did you discover the correlation between hair loss and COVID-19?
Telogen effluvium, or TE, is the kind of hair loss that we usually see after severe stress or systemic illness, sometimes dietary deficiency. So we were kind of expecting to see a few more cases, especially after returning to the clinic after lockdown, but we were surprised of the number of cases that we saw from June onwards of people who reported having COVID symptoms early in the year, in March or April, and then presenting with diffuse thinning and increased shedding all over the scalp now.
So what's the time frame between when people are getting the COVID symptoms and when they're suffering from hair loss?
Usually about 3 months, and this is typical for telogen effluvium.
Telogen effluvium, or TE, is a disturbance in the hair growth cycle where anagen follicles, which are actively growing hair, go into a premature resting phase. The hair will have a root still attached, which looks like a white bulb and is firm to the touch. The clinic discovered 64% of male patients and 38% of women diagnosed with TE reported having experienced COVID-19 related symptoms. The numbers suggest there's a correlation, but more evidence is needed.
When the body is under a lot of stress, it releases stress-related hormones, so things like cortisol, adrenaline, non-adrenaline, and all of these things can have an impact on the hair cycle. So these hormones are normally released from the HPA axis, which is a pathway between the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and adrenal gland, but that releases cortisol into the skin as well, so that would include the scalp, the hair follicles, and then from there cortisol can affect the hair cycle. It can make an actively growing hair follicle to be pushed prematurely into its resting phase, where cells are not dividing anymore, they're not making hair anymore, so the hair naturally sheds after a few weeks.
The World Health Organization has not included hair loss on its list of coronavirus symptoms. Actress Alyssa Milano revealed her hair loss on social media after suffering 4 months of COVID-19 symptoms such as stomach abnormalities, heart palpitations, and shortness of breath. And a study by Indiana University School of Medicine surveyed more than 1,500 patients about symptoms via a Facebook poll and found nearly a third reported hair loss. But stress hormones may not be the only cause.
Usually when a person is diagnosed with COVID, their blood oxygen can be lower. So then that means less oxygenated blood that would go into the hair follicle, less nutrients that would go into the hair follicle as well. On top of that, more cortisol in the scalp and in the hair follicles will have vasoconstricting effect on the peripheral blood vessels. So again, that leads to poor blood circulation. So again, less nutrients that would go into the hair follicle and therefore the hair. And the other thing is more cortisol can lead to more mast cells around the hair follicle, which are a type of white blood cells. And they would normally fight with infection, but when we have more of them in the hair follicle, that can impact the cell division in the hair follicle. So usually when cells are dividing, they will create the structure of the hair, they will create the keratin fibers, but when this slows down, the hair growth slows down as well, and again that's something that pushes the hair to go into resting phase.
Are you still losing hair? I mean, has it been quite consistent over the months?
Yeah, I'm still losing hair. It has started to slow down now because it's obviously been about a month and a half. So I am seeing signs of it starting to slow, which is obviously really positive. But yeah, I am still losing hair, definitely.